Hello and welcome back to this course. In our previous video, we were able to set up our environment for web scraping. In this video, we are going to start working with the request library. So without further ado, I'm going to activate my virtual environment. So source venv slash script slash activate. So I'm going to clear this. Then I'm going to import the request library. So with my import statement, we import the request library. So now what is this request library? Well, request library is the way it is written here. You see request is an HTTP library written in Python for human beings. So when you are using the request library to get or to post into a page, you are basically just doing the same thing that you do with your browser. Okay. So when you're browsing, you're making a HTTP request, and the same thing is happening when you're using this library. So assuming I want to go to a website called mytechdev.com and I use this request library, is basically the same thing as going to my browser to type in www.mytechdev.com. Okay, so without further ado, we are going to start learning how to use this request library. So what can this request library do for you? Well, you can use this request library to get the content of a web page. You can also use this request library to make a post request, that is to post into a website, and you can also use it to make the put and the delete request. All right, so all the type of requests that you can do with your browser, you can also use this library to do it. So when you're making a post request in your browser, you're simply passing in some credentials and you're sending it to the back end. And when you're making a get request, you are simply just passing in, sometimes you're passing in some credentials and you're requesting for that data to be given to you, or you are just browsing a particular web page. So that is a get request. So any action that you take on a website and an information is returned back to you on the browser, then you're making a get request. So another one is a push request, and that is like updating something that is already in the back end, or a delete request, that is like deleting the information that is already in your back end. Now we are going to learn different ways of using this request, and this request library takes the URL that you are requesting. So I am going to create a URL variable. So I'm going to call it URL, and in a string, I'm going to pass in HTTPS forward slash www.exampledomain.com. So this example domain is just like a website that is up there on the browser that anybody can use to practice about anything about URLs and domains. Okay, so you can even pass in real websites like www.mytechwave.com. Okay, so now, and I am going to browse this mytechwave.com, and I'm going to do something like response and set it to request.get. Okay, and then I will pass in my URL. So I could pass this thing here as a string, or I can just pass in the variable that I have already sent. Okay, so and I'm going to print response. Okay, so if I print this response, so we are having something just like a response 200, and what this simply means is that this get request was successful, that they were able to reach my techwave.com. All right, so but if you want to see the content of this response, you can access different variables in this response variable. You can access different items inside within this response. So I can check for response dot status code, and this will simply tell me whether getting this URL was possible, was successful or not successful, or was redirected. So I'm going to print this, and I am seeing 200. So now if you make a HTTPS request and the status code was anything between 200 to 300, then it was successful. If it is anything between 300 to 399, then it is a redirect. And if it is anything between 400 to 499, then it is your own error. It's more like an authentication error that you are trying to access something that you're not supposed to access. Then if you get anything like 500, then it is a server error. Okay, so it's also good you know about your HTTP request codes, so that if you run into any issue when while browsing the internet, you know what the code is about. So the next thing that we are going to do is that we are going to try to get the content of this web page. So we are going to print response.content. Okay, so if we print this, we should be able to see a lot of HTML codes. And what we are seeing now is the code that made up this particular website, mytechvev.com. So I'm going to quickly go to this website on my browser, and I'm going to type it in, mytechvev.com. And if I click on view page source, that is the source code that made up this website, I am going to see all those gibberish that I saw in on the terminal. All right. So it's more of the source code of the website. Okay. So at this point, we are not exactly able to get the actual data on the website. Okay. So I'm going to close this. And the next thing I'm going to try to get is to ask Python the type of content that this request got for us. So I am going to explain that in a bit. So and I'm going to print request.header. I'm going to print this request.header, and it is going to give me the header information of that website. So now we can see a lot of information about that website, that it is linked to Cloudflare, and then we are seeing a lot of the connection, the the cache data, and even the content type. Then we are also seeing the character set, and we can see so many things. So if you are conversant with header informations, you understand some of these things. Okay, so now there are some websites that when you try to browse them, you get something like a JSON file. Okay, so if I go to this login URL, so I'm going to pass that as well, and I am going to, instead of just this, I'm going to say slash login. Okay, so I'm going to also get this request, but this time around I'm going to get dot content. So and I'm going to run, and we are bound to see all those gibberish. Now, so instead of a get request, we are going to do a post request. Okay, and when we are making a post request, we are trying to sign in into the website. So I'm going to create a variable called parameter, and I'm going to set it to, well, the information that this URL might be trying to get. So I'm going to create a dictionary, and I'm going to, the first data there is going to be the username, which is an email. So I am going to pass in, and I am going to pass a correct email. So, and I'm going to pass in a wrong password. Okay, so the next information that is required for this page is going to be the password. Okay, so I'm going to store it in the password value, and I'm going to pass it in as a wrong password. So I'm going to say 12345. All right, so I am going to, so and here I'm going to pass in this parameter that I added. Okay, so I'm going to add it as params as parameters, and I'm going to try to make a post request. So, and I'm going to run this, and you can see now that we have the content type, and you can see now that we have the header information printing. I'm also going to check for the status code again, and if I run this, we have the status code. Then the next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to try to print the URL. Okay, so if I print the URL that I made this request to, you're going to see this URL login is that, and the email is that, and password is that. Okay, so these are the different ways you can use your request. So I am going to change this entirely to exampledomain.com, and We are going to try to just make a simple request, and I want us to see what the test content will look like. So, and here I'm going to change it to get request. And on printing this, we have this example domain.com, and if I try to print the content of this, we are going to get a more clear HTML structure, because that example domain is a very simple website. So you can see the HTML structure, and if I print .text, you can also see the HTML structure. So you can also see the HTML structure. Okay, so now these are the various ways you can try to access your website with the request library. So as we proceed, we are going to be making more use of this request library in our web scraping project, and we are also going to be making use of other tools. So thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you in the next one.